India's electric vehicle revolution is one of the most incredible growth stories happening anywhere in the world right now. But if you look just a little bit deeper past the big headlights, you start seeing some hidden risks that could threaten the whole thing. By July 2025, EVs blew past a massive milestone. Over 5% of all new vehicles registered in India are now electric. That is a really big deal, and it happened unbelievably fast. But to really get what's going on here, we have to look at what exactly is selling. When we think about EVs globally, we are picturing passenger cars. But in India, that's not where the revolution is. It's happening on two and three wheels scooters, motorcycles, auto rickshaws. This is the key to understanding everything else. So, what's the real fuel that's powering this incredible two and three wheel revolution? Is all this amazing growth happening because millions of people just woke up one day and decided to go green and save the planet? Well, when you actually look at the data, the answer is a pretty clear no. The real driver is something way more than that. This is not just some top down government led climate conscious push, it's a bottom up economic revolution. The entire thing is being driven by intense daily cost pressure at the very bottom of the economic pyramid. And once you see it through that lens, it changes how you have to look at everything else. If someone drives an auto rickshaw for a living or uses a scooter to make deliveries, it's cash that comes directly out of their pocket, out of their daily income. So when an electric option shows up that's just cheaper to run every day, switching isn't really an environmental choice. It's a business decision. It's about survival. So that brings us to the crucial point, the whole foundation of India's EV story. All that incredible growth, it all hangs on this one kind of fragile question. Can these electric vehicles stay cheaper to run? If the answer is yes, the revolution rolls on. But if the answer is no, the whole system gets pretty shaky. And believe me, there are some serious challenges to keeping that cost advantage. The first big threat is what you could call the import dependency trap. And it's a classic case of solving one problem by accidentally creating a whole new one. We all know India has to import a ton of oil, and the big dream for EVs was to break free from that. What was actually happening is the country is just swapping one dependency for another. Instead of being reliant on imported oil, it's importing minerals for batteries. We are talking lithium, nickel, cobalt, most of which come from just a handful of other countries. Now, this is where you can really see the second and third order effects. It's like a chain reaction with real world consequences. So, a supply problem halfway across the world causes mineral prices to spike. All of a sudden, the cost to replace a battery, which is the most expensive part of the vehicle, it will skyrocket. And that makes the second-hand market totally unpredictable. Who's going to buy a used EV if a new battery costs a fortune? So what happens? The banks get nervous. They start looking at EV loans as high risk. And what do? They raise interest rates, which makes the vehicles more expensive. And just like that, the cost advantage starts to evaporate. And that import dependency, as big of a deal as it is not the only problem. When you start digging around, you find a few other major cracks in the foundation of this EV boom. Let's look at the whole green angle. Where is the electricity that's actually charging all these new vehicles actually coming from? This chart tells a pretty stark story. Almost three quarters of India's electricity comes from burning coal. So you might be driving a zero emission scooter, but you're often plugging it into a grid powered by a fossil fuel. That really pushes back any climate benefit. And it doesn't stop there. What happens when the batteries die? Right now, less than 5% are properly formally recycled. The rest, they just leak into the informal economy, creating a huge risk of toxic chemicals seeping into the ground. On top of that, the manufacturing process uses these nasty things called forever chemicals, which are pollutants that just don't break down and can cause serious health problems. Let's switch over to the financial side now, because remember, everything comes back to cost. This chart shows how much value a vehicle from 2020 has lost. As you can see, plain as day, EVs are losing their value way faster than regular petrol or diesel vehicles. This rapid drop in value creates another one of those ripple effects we talked about. It makes a whole market feel fragile. It's vulnerable to big shocks. Imagine an EV fleet company goes bankrupt and suddenly floods the market with thousands of cheap used EVs. And this all circles right back to the same problem. Because the long term value is so uncertain, lenders get skittish. They see the loans as high risk and interest rates go up, threatening that all important cost advantage that got this whole thing started. And finally, you have the on the ground, real world problems. India's climate can be brutal. Monsoon floods can be a massive fire hazard for battery packs. Extreme heat messes with performance, and the cold can just kill your range. And then there's the grey market. These super cheap scooters being sold with sketchy recycled battery cells that dramatically increase the risk of fires. So, when you put all of these pieces together, you kind of have to step back and ask a much bigger question. Is this whole thing, this revolution, a success story, or is it a ticking time bomb? Let's just do a quick recap of the big picture risks. We're looking at a system that depends on imported materials, it runs on a coal heavy grid, it has no real solution for its own waste, it has to operate in a really tough climate, it's super sensitive to financial shocks, and it's exposed to the dangers of a huge informal market. And that really is the bottom line, isn't it? India is trying to do something incredibly ambitious. It's trying to scale up this massively complex new energy and transportation system. But it's doing it before all the foundations, from the supply chain to the power grid to recycling, are really ready for it. Which leaves us with a one final critical question. Is this incredible, super fast, cost driven growth a sustainable miracle, a blueprint for other developing countries to follow? Or is it a ticking time bomb, built so quickly on such a fragile foundation that it might just collapse under the first real shock? That is the hidden risk in India's EV revolution.